Morning, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. There's Bugsy Malone. It's horrible out. It's muggy, moody, rainy, damp, dank, horrible Saturday. And it's the international break. So, not too much to talk about in the way of Tottenham Hotspur news. And that's part of the reason why I haven't been around for the last couple of days. Apologies if you were waiting for something to come. There's been not a lot of news, but also I've had a little bit of man flu. I'm still suffering from it, so haven't really had the energy to kind of get out here and waffle on to you lovely people. But today there's a couple of stories that I wanted to update you on or keep you abreast of in the transfer news, views and clues. Before we get into it, guys, please do me a favour, smash the like button for me on the video if you enjoy the content. It really does help the channel, push it out to new Tottenham fans. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. 50% of you who watch the channel regularly haven't hit it. Really, again, is important in the channel's growth prospects to get those subscriptions. It's free to do. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. And the stories are, guys, as follows. First off, before we get into transfer news, views and clues, a little bit of injury update. I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. On Thursday night, I think it was, Sonny played for Korea and got a really bad blow to his ankle. He was in agony, ended up being substituted off. Anybody that was watching the game live or saw it on Twitter, the clips probably took a collective holding of breath. The last thing we need is another injury. Anyway, turns out after the game he was seen running around, sort of, meeting and greeting and celebrating with the Korean fans and the players, so I think it's probably just an impact injury and we should be okay. But again, it's the last thing you need, guys. How long-term are our long-term injuries? There's so many of them, and the length of them is just devastating to our chances. Mickey van der Ven, months. Maddison, months. Sessegnon's been out for months. Lo Celso basically hasn't really been fit the entire season, so months. Richarlison now is months. Manuel Solomon, months. Perisic, months. Not these little these stories that you hear from rival fans when they dismiss your injury concerns. Everybody has injuries, mate. Yeah, okay, but your injury is like a bruised toe for a few days. Ours is an ACL. There's levels to the injury game. There's context. So the last thing we need is another injury. But hopefully we're going to get through it. Well, there's still, I think, 2 more rounds of international fixtures before Villa next Sunday. So hopefully we can get through it. And boy Joe, do we need to get through to January without any more concerns to be able to help us get through this period and then hopefully be able to add strength. And on that note, there's a couple of stories I want to bring to you. One of them was out a couple of days ago. Like I said, I was sick, so I didn't bring it to your attention, but I don't really think it's got too much merit anyway, and that is Ruben NEVES, the ex-Wolves, now playing in Saudi Arabia, the defensive midfielder, brilliant creator, brilliantly press resistant, pops up with goals here and there, just a wonderful talent. Disappointing to see the guy give up his sort of Premier League aspirations initially when he went. I think he's 26 years old, to go over and chase the money. My first thought was like, is this just showing what sort of person, what sort of character he is? He's about the money, not about the aspirations for his career, etc. And then obviously as time sort of went on, you started to get this wind of, how you now understand that 5 of the Saudi Arabian teams are owned by the same people. The PIF fund that owns Newcastle. The PIF fund also is involved with Clearlake Capital, who owns Chelsea. There's so much sort of skullduggery around with, this current version of whatever we call this game of football, that maybe there's more to it, in as much as he was loaned out there with the intention of being used as a make weight, as a free gimme, to circumvent FFP for one of the clubs that they have a vested interest in the Premier League or elsewhere in January. And we'll see how it works out. But the link to Tottenham, I think, is a little bit spurious. I've seen him linked with Arsenal, with Newcastle. The Arsenal fans are saying they'd rather get Douglas Luiz than Ruben NEVES. For me, Douglas Luiz, whilst he's having a good season, I still think he's too slow to play the sort of way that Arsenal would like to play. And I know Tottenham have been linked with Luiz as well, but in terms of Ruben NEVES, I just don't see it. I think if he is going to go anywhere, he'd probably go to Newcastle, because they're trying to find a way to, move through their own quagmire of FFP. They lost Tonali for a 10-month ban. Are they going to do something there? And obviously there's the connections, right? So I just don't see Tottenham being the answer for Ruben Neves. However, the logic behind it, I guess, is if Højbjerg does want to go to Juve, if Juve can find the money or someone else can find the money for Højbjerg and he wants to go, then we could get 35 million quid, put that something like towards a transfer budget, and then you'll need someone to come in. And in Ruben Neves, you do have a player that is, the perfect replacement, the perfect stand-in for someone like a Bissouma. He could also play in the secondary 8 and compete with Bentancur and Sarr. And I think that Tottenham, might look at it and think if there's a way that we can sell Højbjerg and then loan Neves, then it's a nice little way of sort of pushing money around on a piece of paper. Same way I think that other teams will look at it as well. And for me personally, I think that's just for what it's worth, something that we'll see a lot of this January. Given the amount of teams that are up against FFP thresholds, I do think you'll see, if there is a lot of business, not that there's ever a lot of business, but if there's the standard typical amount of business in January, I think you'll see a lot of loans with obligations, loans with options, because they can kick the can down the road with regards to their FFP, but they can still do the business that they want. That might be something that you see with like an Ivan Toney to an Arsenal, even though apparently Ivan Toney yesterday has said that he's willing to sign a contract extension with Brentford in order to kind of help protect that club, and then maybe still be sold in the summer or later on. It's all very interesting, but I just think that you'll still see the clubs that are up against FFP doing business, but you'll just see them on loans with loan fees, with obligations or options later on, to give those sort of buying clubs more time to move assets on in the future. It is what it is. I think Tottenham will do the same. Anyway, get Ruben Neves out of the way. Let's talk about the main topic of the day, and it's Raphinha. Remember him? Love that guy. Absolutely world class in my opinion on his day. Right winger, can take on the world with his feet. Can play off the right, can play off the left. He moved to Barcelona 2 summers ago. In his first season, I think he got 10 goals and 10 assists in 50 games for Barca. This season, he's been a little bit kind of pushed out by the 16-year-old. I forget his name. Levin, whatever. You know what I'm talking about, the 16-year-old superstar, who has kept him out of the team for a lot of the minutes. And look, Barcelona are doing a lot of different kind of systems and different formations at the moment. But in this season, he scored 10 goals. Raphinha scored 2 goals and 2 assists in 10 games. So a decent-ish return, but a player that's electrifying on his day. Can play on the right, can play off the left. Barcelona paid, I think, 69 million euros for him, about 60 million pounds, something like that. And according to the reports, the Football Insider, dropped the exclusive, and now it's all being picked up by the aggregators. They're saying that Tottenham would like to bring him away from there, and that it could be a loan with an obligation, but more likely it would be a permanent sale, because Barcelona are looking at ways to finance the permanent deals that they want to make permanent for their current loans, João Felix and Cancelo, who have both started their careers very well in Barcelona. So it's an interesting one. A lot of the Tottenham fan base say, like, we don't need any more wingers. We've got so many of them. We've got Brian Hill, we've got Perisic, Manuel Solomon, Richarlison, Brennan Johnson, Dejan Kulusevski. We've already got 6 wingers. Why do we need another one? And I would say, because none of them do what a winger should do when you're playing Angeball. None of them want to take the players on. Perisic did, right? Perisic was good, was great at it, but he's out, right? He's out. He probably played his last game. Rumours are that he might even be moved whilst injured to Hajduk Split in January as part of the deal that got Vuskovic to come to Tottenham. So he might be out of the way. But even if he does come back and play for Tottenham all the way through to the summer, he's not going to have his contract renewed. So he's not going to be here for next summer. So, we're not just thinking about now, we're thinking about the future as well. Manuel Solomon, like a good player on his day, again, does a lot. For me, he does a lot of kind of flatters to deceive. It looks busy doing nothing. A lot of step overs, standing still. Ultimately, he likes to come off the left, push the ball to his right and try and hit the bottom corner or the top corner, a bit like Sonny was doing back in the day, but just a poor man's version of him. He came in, he's also incredibly injury prone, right? He's only been around, in the Premier League, he's been here for 3 seasons and he's been out more than he hasn't with injuries, long-term injuries all the time. And I just think that Tottenham signed him because it's a freebie that can then be registered on the accounts, the £25 million asset, and that maybe some point in the future we can sell him and make some money on it. and in the meantime you've got a decent enough player there. So I think that there was logic to the transfer, but ultimately I just don't think there's any real long-term plan envisioned with Solomon. It's one of those, if he hits the ground running, cool, you've got a good player. If he doesn't, well, he's worth something, so we might as well sign him for free and turn it into a profit. So I think you can chalk those two off. Brennan Johnson, definitely someone to have around, but thus far from what we've seen of him, he's a pace merchant, wants to play off the shoulder, doesn't want to take players on. For what it's worth, I know he's coming back from an injury and I know he's not match fit, so I'm not going to call him out too much, but I think there's a difference between match fitness and general fitness. And what I saw of him against Wolves in the second half, remember I was at the game and I could just look at him when the ball was down there, I could just look at what he was doing, and focus on him that the cameras couldn't. He looked like he was blowing chunks after 45 minutes. He just not only did he not look match fit, he didn't look fit to me. He didn't look like he was fit, and for a young 22-year-old, I think he needs to work on his cardiovascular program a little bit more. And I think he needs to learn. What was interesting about Postecoglou is we haven't really ever heard Postecoglou call out any of the players specifically for bad performances. He's not that sort of guy. Maybe he does it in the dressing room, but he doesn't do it on the cameras. But after the Wolves game, he actually went as far as I've heard him go in a critique by saying, yeah, Brennan Johnson was one of the guys who I was expecting more from on the day. So I'm not sure if we've found anything like the best of him yet, and I'm not sure that he's learnt the system yet, and I think he will. I think he's fine, so we're going to give him a tick, but I'm going to move on. Brian Hill, a player that we still haven't seen anything like the best of for my liking. I would really like to see Brian Hill start a game and run a team from the get-go, not come on in the last 10 minutes when we're either trying to hold on or there's like the game's been impacted by variance and by what's happened in the conditions of the actual 80 minutes before it. I'd like to see him get the chance on the left from the start, because I think that there's a player there and we just haven't seen it. And also, for what it's worth, when you think about Brennan Johnson, would you rather have Brennan Johnson, whilst he only has like half a tank in his body, would you rather him use that half a tank running at fresh legs at the start, or would you rather him come off the bench in the 60th minute and use that half a tank running at tired legs? For me, I think that there's an argument to try Brennan Johnson from the start. To try Brian Hill from the start on the left. There's an argument to put Brennan Johnson on the right, where he's supposed to be, his natural position. Haven't seen that yet. Dejan Kulusevski as a winger, look, a lot of huffing and puffing, I love what he does well, but what he does not so well infuriates me. I've said it before, he's got a right foot, he just chooses not to use it, and he's incredibly predictable. I think that one of the options could be to play him on the left-hand side and let him use that left foot to get to the byline and take players on, but we haven't seen it from Ange. Another option could be to bring him into the middle and let him have more space. And number 10, in Maddison's absence, that uses his left foot is another variable that opposition players are not going to be too used to. It's not that familiar, not that frequently found, and I think he could do really well in that 10 and create in a creative role. And then you could put Brennan Johnson on the right and Brian Hill on the left and see what happens. To me, I think that we've got a lot of wingers, but for either injury reasons, lack of game time reasons, fitness reasons, or just inability to learn what's asked of him or asked of them, we don't really have anybody that drives at players and takes on in a one-on-one situation and has any kind of recent historical track record of generating or yielding anything from it. And for me, it's a frustration, and so I do absolutely see the value in bringing in someone like a Raphinha, although I think that he's going to be very expensive. If Barcelona want their money back, 60 million quid, or 50 million quid, 40 million quid, whatever, is too much money. Before I move on to Raphinha, I forgot to talk about Richarlison. Look, Richarlison for me is, how I feel. I'm not going to go through it anymore. And hopefully there's the links to Saudi Arabia that will materialise that he might be able to get out after he, in January, after his surgery recovery procedure is almost complete, and we can get some of the money back for him. If we can get the money back for him, then obviously that bolsters. By the way, did you read the Everton story today about Everton having 10 points deducted? Part of the reason why they mismanaged their FFP and broke their accounts is because they had booked £80 million sale for Richarlison, and Tottenham only got paid 60 million. So they thought that Richarlison was worth £80 million in their own kind of financial sort of preparation, and Daniel Levy thought he was getting a steal at £60 million, taking advantage of Everton's financial situation, like a fire sale, which is madness. Like Daniel Levy needs to think a little bit outside the box. Just because a player is valued at 80 and you think you can take advantage of the club that values him at 80 by paying 60, you're still not getting a player that's worth 60 million quid, mate. Like, I think there's a little bit of joined up thinking that needs to take place there, and it didn't take place with Richarlison. Anyway, we move. Richarlison, another winger option, but for me, just no good. He's just no good at all. And if you could sell him to Saudi Arabia, you could bring your money in. Then maybe the story for Raphinha makes sense, but ultimately, as much as I absolutely love Raphinha, I think he's such a brilliant, brilliant player. Contributes both creatively and obviously in the way that matters in goals and assists. I just think that the story is a little bit too expensive. It's too rich for our blood with what we're facing. I don't necessarily know how much money is available. I personally think that the stories about Tottenham's budgets being a little bit restricted are fairly more true than not, although other people say don't believe that, it's just a smokescreen because people don't want to think that Tottenham are going to spend Harry Kane money. I think the former is probably more true, but we'll see. But with regards to Raphinha, when we're also looking for maybe a striker with, you know, Jimenez and also centre backs, you know, I just don't see us being able to splash out another 60-70 million on Raphinha. If we can, and if it doesn't disrupt their other kind of business angles, then I'm all for it. But I personally think that there's other options out there, and you know, we've spoken about them before. There's Antonio Nusa from Bruges, there's Andreas Skov Olsen from Bruges, there's Williams from out in Spain, although Nico Williams, he's apparently willing to sign a new contract with them. And not necessarily to stay at the club, but just to kind of protect the club in terms of doing some loyalty kind of stuff, so they can still sell him but not have that the kind of their hands held behind their back by the idea that the contracts are running down. There's so many wingers, we've spoken about them all. I'll do a video on it. By the way, I'm also going to be doing a video tomorrow morning. I've already recorded it, we'll drop in tomorrow. The top 10 centre-back options for Tottenham in January. Let me know your thoughts on Raphinha. For me, I love it. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that when you see that the price tag is going to be something like 50, 60 million, whatever, I think that there's an opportunity cost, and Tottenham have got 3 players to bring in January. One of them will be a centre-back that will probably cost 20 million. One of them will be a striker, hopefully, in Santiago Jimenez. One of them will be a winger. And all that's notwithstanding selling and trying to replace a Højbjerg if he goes. So, yeah. Raphinha for me would be a dream signing, but I just don't see it happening. What about you guys? Let me know. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, bye-bye.